Scott, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Absolutely pleasure to have you on. I enjoy your podcast. I can't believe how many episodes are you at just there at the minute. I know it's a phenomenal amount.
Yeah, I think I've recorded, oh gosh, maybe 530 or so episodes now. It's somewhere in that number. It's a lot of episodes. They all haven't been released yet. I record them. I have a bunch in the queue, ready to go. But it's definitely been a lot. This past summer, I recorded the 500th episode, and I was thinking back, like, where did the time go? I remember just starting off with like the second episode and thinking, I don't know what I'm doing with this podcast. Even the technical stuff, the equipment and how to record, and the first few episodes, if you go back and listen to it, they're absolute garbage. As time goes on, you start to learn and get a cadence and a routine in and everything. It's gotten to be a much smoother process as time has gone on. So, but thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a conversation with you here.
Yeah, well, definitely. I definitely think you're the message you're spreading is such a relevant one. I can imagine. I think you set it up in 2019, your podcast.
Yeah.
Like it probably, because like podcasts really, I think during COVID, it kind of probably really accelerated. But back then, was it hard to find guests? Because and just even to give the read our listeners a quick preview, even just give them a quick blurb like of what your podcast is, the Drive On podcast.
Sure, yeah, the Drive On podcast. It's focused on helping military veterans with a wide variety of issues. Oftentimes transitioning from the military into civilian life is a difficult transition. There's a lot of sense of purpose and meaning behind the work that you do in the military, and then when you get out, you're struggling to find that sense of purpose, and you sometimes, a lot of times, military veterans feel like they're all alone, even though they're not. There's many people who've gone through the exact same things, but they oftentimes feel like they're alone and that they don't know where to turn, what resources are available to them. And so, unfortunately, a lot of times people start making the decision to take their own life. And that's obviously not something that we want anyone to do. And so after losing several people that way myself that I served with, I decided I wanted to do something to help those who or feeling lost, feeling hopeless, feeling like they had nobody to turn to, no resources available to them. And so that's where the podcast started. And yeah, back in 2019 is when it started. And you're right, probably about a year later, things really started taking off. There were a lot more podcasts that were started that year later in 2020, but a lot more people were listening to podcasts too. A lot of people working from home and things like that, where they kind of had a little more freedom to listen to a thing that they wanted to listen to, as opposed to maybe working in an office. You may not have that same flexibility. And so it seemed like more people were listening to it anyways, back then. And then, it just kind of grew from there. And it's, continuing to grow, and it's doing great things. And I hear from people all the time that, every once in a while I'll get a message from someone. It's like, I really needed to hear that message today, whatever it was that we were talking about in the episode that came out that week or whatever. And so it's fulfilling to me, because I'm able to kind of give back to the community that I served in, and that, there are people out there still serving and still going through the same things that a lot of us went through. And I want to make sure that they know that there are resources available to them, and it's not, like you have to carry this burden on your own.
Yeah, and because for obviously I haven't served in conflict. Ireland's a neutral country, so like our military does a lot of like UN peacekeeping, and we do have like soldiers out in conflict zones, but like it's peacekeeping and stuff like that. But it's very hard for me to like understand like the level of like what must actually go through a soldier's mind as when they're out there. Like what can be done? Like I know you have so many people on. You're like honestly, you're probably an expert now on hearing people's stories, hearing what they're going through. But like, is there a kind of solution to try get people integrated back in? Because obviously, when you go to war, probably some of it has to come home with you. Or, it's going to get caught up in your psyche.
Yeah, it does, and with a lot of people, it does come home. And the thing that I found from the conversations that I've had with people is that you can have two people in the same exact situation. Let's say in a combat situation where they may be sitting right next to each other, not sitting necessarily, but they're side by side, experiencing the exact same thing. The same bullets are flying over their head and everything like that. and one can come home and be totally fine and have no mental health issues or anything like that. And they're able to handle it a whole lot better. And the other person who was right next to them, maybe just a arm's length away or so, they come home and they are a disaster, and their mental health is all messed up, and things are just not the way they should be. And so that's, I think, where it gets tricky, because we don't know which side of the fence you're going to land on until you've landed on it. And so what does this person need? What does that person need? And everybody's going to be different in terms of what they need, which is why I do what I do with my podcast, because someone might go to traditional talk therapy or, other types of therapies that might be available, and it may not work for them. And then in the back of their head, they're being told that, well, this works for, 80 to 85% of the people who go through it. And they're like, okay, well, there's something obviously must be wrong with me. I'm broken. I'm not able to, adapt or adjust to be able to deal with this. And that it's kind of like the wrong message to send to people, is telling them that, oh, this works for so many people, it should work for you. And if, and that to me is just not the right message. The right message is keep trying. Try something else. If you go and you try the talk therapy and you give it a good try, I don't mean like go to one session and it's like, geez, that didn't work for me, it must not work. No, give it a little while, give it some time. And if it doesn't work for you, it may be that that's not the right thing for you. But there's other things out there. There are athletic events that people do, but in a community setting where they get together and there's people going through similar issues, and they do those physical activities together. And a lot of times that's what people need. They need something physical to kind of either distract their mind or keep them just moving forward and not being sedentary, sitting at home, sitting on the couch, not getting out of bed, and that type of thing. And isolating themselves, importantly, too, is a problem. And so if they are continuing to do those types of things, that is not the direction that we want people to go. We want them to get out, get involved with something, and it doesn't really matter what that thing is, because again, it's going to be different for everybody. You might be into artwork and painting and that type of thing, and so that might be you go to a group art class and you do your artwork there, and that's where you find the most healing. Someone else might be more along the lines of, I'd like to get out into nature and go for a hike or go, fishing or camping or any of those types of things. And they get out into nature, and that is what's healing to them. And so I think the message that I've learned along the way from all these conversations that I've had with people is just keep trying. No matter what it is that you've tried before, if you think you've tried everything, you're wrong. There's so many other things out there that you could keep trying, and don't stop until you find the thing that works for you.
And I think in life, it's like finding purpose, finding meaning is similar to that. Like maybe you mightn't like, and I think even because some people will jump straight into college and maybe realize, oh, the degree I'm doing isn't for me, but like keep trying until you find like your passion. But I do want to go back there to a thing you said just a moment ago, because I think it's so important, really. Like I think there was a paradigm in psychology and in like therapeutic treatment, clinical psychology, of it was kind of almost the serotonin model of depression. You were like, your brain is broken, you need an SSRI, but like I think you kind of said it there as well. Oh, the therapy didn't work, there's something broken about me. And I think that is the most like pernicious messaging you can ever get, like, because I think there's always a solution. But that was the dominant messaging within the therapeutic diagnostics was, oh, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, there's something wrong, your brain is broken, you're not producing this chemical or that chemical. Like, has that changed a bit? Like, do you see within like the kind of veterans going into therapy, is it like a kind of broken model, or it is, no, we just need to get you into the right headspace again?
Yeah, and I think from my own experience with the therapy that I've gone through and the different treatments and things that I've tried, it is definitely more, it's shifted away from you're broken, you need to, something's wrong with you, and that type of mindset. Even in some of the language that is used, it's no longer post-traumatic stress disorder. It's just post-traumatic stress. It's like, this is the way it's looked at is it's a normal human reaction to kind of abnormal situations that you're put
That's
into,
the thing.
right?
It's
Right?
so normal. It's like, 'cause- and the way sometimes I think about it in this, and this is probably the complete wrong way, but I think the people that are going to be immune to PTSD are probably going to be people higher on psychopathy scale, where, they don't get affected by anything. Like, and that's not to say anyone is a psychopath that isn't feeling PTSD, but like, because we know if you go into the literature on like psychopathy and stuff, their amygdala is really underregulated. So, they can't really feel much of anything, whether it's love, joy, depression, trauma, anything. They're very underregulated. But like, I think put anyone through, like, people will have a traumatic event from something like maybe, a kind of mild car crash and stuff. Like maybe if the driver came and slammed into them from the side, there's going to be a big trigger there that, if I'm going along a crossroads or anything like that, there's going to be a massive trigger of something coming. But then you put someone in a war zone, it's like, because you're constantly under threat. And I think that's where a lot of the literature points to. Sometimes it's not even and again, this is not me saying it from someone that's served, but this is me saying it from the literature shows that it's the being under threat for a sustained period of time creates it's like mega trauma, more so than the actual conflict, because I think you can probably deal with that, but it's really hard to deal with something that you're constantly waiting on that maybe is going to come, and when is it going to come? You kind of build up like this almost scar tissue on your psyche.
Yeah, and there's several things that happen there with that, is that you live in that constant state of heightened alertness and always keeping your head on a swivel, looking where's the next threat coming from, and that just becomes normal to you. And so when you come back home and you're with your family out at a restaurant, you're constantly looking around for where's the nearest exit, where's the potential threats coming from, where are things like that. And as opposed to sitting and just enjoying the meal with your family, and you're constantly looking around, and it could be anywhere, not just a restaurant. It could be filling up your car with gas at the gas station, or going to the grocery store, or going to work even. If depending on the environment that you work in, could be a problem too. But then, in addition to that, one thing that I found with a lot of combat veterans is that you are always living with a kind of heightened state of adrenaline going through your system. And when you have that constantly going through your system, it's like a drug, and you get addicted to it. And it's like you want more and more of that. And when you come back, it's like I can't get enough of this adrenaline. And you see a lot of times guys will end up doing extreme sports, or like skydiving, or anything with an element of danger to it, because they need that fix, if you will, of that adrenaline to keep them going. Because just normal life, try to get a job and sit in an office and work behind a computer at a desk all day, that's not going to do it for you. That's not going to give you that kind of adrenaline rush. And a lot of times, I don't know how true the statistics are, but I've heard that military veterans, at least here in the US, after getting out of the military, within 2 years, they've already moved on from that first job that they had after the military. About 80% of those people have moved on to another job. And I think a lot of it is because they're just so bored at the job that they have. And, where do I find that next rush and something I can get constantly, not just, oh yeah, I'm going to go skydiving on the weekend. I need it today. I need it tomorrow. I need it the next day.
And that's what, like, they call that in like the hedonic treadmill, that it's just like, and the hedonic is going back to like hedonism, coming from like the kind of Greek term hedonic. But you see this like in a kind of more like a tangential way. You see this a lot on like with dopamine, because like people are constantly on social media, like to a very different degree, but looking for the next novel find, or they're putting extra sugar on cereal because they need to get back to that, like that flavor. You see this so much; it's been hacked, that dopamine. But I think from the soldier's perspective, it's more of this like kind of adrenal, like as you said, the adrenal, which is like I can imagine that has devastating consequences as well, because if you can't skydive every day, like alcohol or drugs are probably going to give you some rush. Like you're going to pay a dividend the next day, but you're going to get some rush temporarily.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is you get that temporary boost and then you crash. And it's very similar to a drug where, yeah, sure, you'll get the high, but then you come off of it and you need more. And unfortunately, sometimes it kind of has a cumulative effect too, where you'll have someone who maybe has a healthy level of risk taking and things like that they may go skydiving every once in a while or something, but eventually that's not enough, and so then they need that next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and unfortunately that leads sometimes to people being unfaithful in their marriages and things like that, because there's a rush there too with maybe I'll get caught, maybe I won't, but let's find out, and like that's not the right thing to do either. Like that, you don't want to start ruining relationships and stuff because of those types of things. So it's I think we've very clearly laid out the fact that this is a very complicated issue that has a lot of different ways to look at it from each individual's perspective. What does each individual need? And unfortunately, there's no magic pill that's going to fix everybody. One cure-all solution for everybody. It's a lot of different solutions for a lot of different people, and I think that unfortunately that's the way we need to start looking at it. Is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah, definitely not. And I think, like you're probably alluding to there as well, it's almost like we kind of get hijacked, like because. And I even know, like, sometimes it can be really regimented with, like, going to the gym, eating well and all. You kind of have, like, a bad weekend or 2 weekends, or, like, something's going on, you're in a high stress. And next minute, everything can kind of go. But it's, like, it's really hard to get the almost modality to be able to, like, try get back to an anchor point. And it can be really difficult sometimes because, like, life moves so fast and there's always something going on. But it's trying to find them anchor points.
Sure. And yeah, those anchor points can be hard to find too when your thoughts and your belief system and things that you have in your own mind are maybe flawed is not the right word to use, but they're not grounded in reality. You may have a belief system that's just not true. That you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not strong enough, fast enough, whatever. And so, like, those things may not necessarily be true, or if they are, who cares? It's not a big deal. But that might keep you back from, trying something new and accelerating your life,
Definitely. And, like, I think even the fact that I suppose you're talking about what we see, there's a lot of, like, military veterans now opening up. Like, I think you mentioned in the start of your book where your grandfather served in World War II and never spoke about it, like never. And even I think there's one reference in it, I think, where your nanny, like, or your granny, like, shut him down, like, he's not allowed to talk about that.
Sure.
But, like, the whole system back then was like, do you think they must have suffered, like, incredibly, like, just in silence, which is so sad to think. These people that went over, like, World War II was, as anyone that kind of has any even tertiary knowledge, like, it was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And what them people must have experienced over there, and then to come back and then to have to stay silent. Like, have you any, like, idea, like, was your granddad, like, was he even did he meet up with fellow veterans that maybe would have had some conversation, or was it all buried?
I'm not sure with him specifically if he met up with other people that he served with, or just other veterans in general. But I do know that there are, here in the U.S. anyways, there are organizations, Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, organizations like that, which are organizations that they have local posts where, throughout the country, and people become members of them, and they can go there, and there's just other veterans there who either maybe some of them have served in combat, some of them have not, but they're all veterans who are a member of these organizations. And way back when, they kind of had a stigma of, we look at it as from the younger generation, it's kind of like grandpa's drinking club. It was just kind of like a smoky bar, and
Yeah.
that's where the old veterans would go and hang out, and they go get their cheap beer and things over there, and but
Yeah.
they'd hang out, and they'd have those people to talk to, at least. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of those organizations are seen at now as like an old man's club, and it's not really something that a lot of the younger generation want to be a part of, because they don't want to be hanging out with the old guys necessarily.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of a rebrand that needs to be done there to kind of say, hey, look, like we've always been there for, whether it was the Vietnam era, the World War II era, or modern era, the Iraq and Afghanistan war era. We're there for you, regardless of when you served. And come on down and check out what these places are all about. And I think that will be helpful, for people today. But back then, I think that was pretty much the extent of what they had for returning service members. It was those types of organizations where they can get together with other veterans. But a lot of times, like you were just alluding to from the book, like my grandmother would just kind of shut them down and say, no one wants to hear about that Navy stuff, and whatever it was that he was talking about. And so the few times that he did start to talk about it, kind of got shut down. And that's the wrong message to have too. It's like, if
Yeah.
I
Because it could have
think,
been cathartic.
yeah, for sure. For him, it very, very well could be. And I know for myself, sometimes having these conversations like we're having right now, or any of the conversations I've had on my podcast, even some of the guests that I've had, the very first time that they've opened up and talked about their experiences was on my podcast. And after the conversation, they just tell me that was like such a huge weight off of my shoulders, that I don't feel like I have to keep that in anymore, and I can talk about it, and it's okay. It's not a scary thing to talk about. And so, like, shoot, don't stop someone from talking. If any veteran, I don't care what war, what era, or what country they're from, they have a story to tell from their time in their service. I mean, I want to sit down and listen to that, because I'm sure, first off, it's going to be an interesting story, but also it's probably going to be helpful for that person.
100%. And like you mentioned there a moment ago, like, it's not seen as maybe cool in some of these centres. Like, I think the most interesting probably people you're going to get in a room are some of them old timers that were in Nam, and like, they
Yeah,
have stories, man. They have
sure.
probably some of the wildest stories you can imagine. Like, but yeah, but I think it's like, and because I want to get into your story probably after this, but and I think like this is what I'm seeing. Like, obviously I'm living in Ireland, but we get a like huge amount of American news, and like, because America's still kind of like the dad of the world. Like, it's like, the whole of Europe is like watching what America's going to do. But like, it just seems like there's this being, and I don't know if you can attest to this, or maybe I'm just getting like, we get headlines that aren't accurate, but it does seem like there's this. I remember in your book, man, at the start where you're talking about you had a fascination in military, but you had a big love for your country. I think that's actually the exact statement you had in it. It's one of maybe chapter two. But I feel like now, what I see anyway, America seems to have like that kind of love your country is seen as a negative almost connotation. Like, is that true, or is it just kind of the news we get?
That's kind of the sentiment that I feel is starting to become more predominant around the country. It's not something that I
Yeah.
believe in personally, and I teach my kids, the way I was brought up. I try to teach them the same thing. Pride in your country, and love the country that you live in. And the one thing I just find so fascinating about that mindset that you are talking about is that there's so many people who do hate this country, but there's so many people knocking down the door trying to get in, and it just doesn't seem to add up. Like, if it's such a terrible place to be, why are you trying to come here?
Yeah.
But then on the other hand too, there are people who have they've been maybe wronged by something, maybe it's the legal system or something like that, and I can see how someone might have a negative connotation associated with it like that. But if you look at the country as a whole, the people as a whole, even just go back almost 25 years now, to 9/11, when the attacks took place. I never want another thing like that to happen here in this country. But the way the people came together, I don't care what political party you affiliate with, or what religion you are, or what color your skin is, or what background, or what job you have, anything like that. We were all Americans, and really didn't matter. None of that stuff mattered the day after, and in the several days and weeks and months after. Like that was such like a intense feeling of patriotism and pride in your country and all that. I remember President Bush at the time. There was a baseball game that he went to shortly after all those attacks took place, and he threw out the first pitch of the game, and he threw a perfect pitch, and the whole place just went crazy, and it was they were so excited for that, and to see like your president there, and whether you voted for him or not, it didn't matter at that point.
The way it was with like 9/11 as well. It's like, I think, like, if you look at any movie, any like good movie, like there's always like an evil to be conquered, and like that was such a vile act of evil that it's so like. And the thing is, things are so convoluted these days, because I don't know what it is. Maybe the way things are presented to us, but everything seems more convoluted. It's really hard to say that's good, that's evil, because, and I'm not sure if it's like the way it's presented to us, because I kind of see grey everywhere and no black and white. But 9/11 was the biggest black and white kind of moment ever. An evil act on like such a scale had occurred. And like, you look at any movie, it's like a Lord of the Rings or that. Like, there's always going to be a Mordor, and like that's where like the good kind of unite to conquer this evil. And I think that's almost what 9/11 was. Like, since then, like, and again, it is, thankfully there has been no other act, but it's very like, it's everything then is like, there's no Mordor and the elves, dwarves, if we go to Lord of the Rings or anything like that. It's just all these fractions and this kind of grey space. But obviously it's not. I genuinely think it's just the way we're interpreting it or something.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I see more of the gray area too, like what you were describing. But so many people seem to be, either you agree 100% with everything that I have to say, or you are on the opposite side of everything, as far as I'm concerned. And that to me, it was like, that just doesn't make sense. Like, we can agree on some things and maybe not everything. I've yet to meet anybody that I agree with everything on. Like, even my wife, we don't agree on everything, right?
Yeah,
and we still, but we still love each other, right? It's not like we're hey, you disagree on this one thing, well, that's it. Let's call it quits. Like that would be a ridiculous thing to do. How would the human race continue if we were just continuing to just fight each other on every little topic? And so that's the thing I that just drives me crazy, when I see people who will just tear apart someone who disagrees on like one minor thing, and they may otherwise be best of friends, but that one thing is just so divisive for so many people that it just tears things apart, and that's not the right way to look at things, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if there was a psychologist, you might be aware of him, like Carl Jung. He was like he was a contemporary of like Sigmund Freud and all, an Austrian psychologist, like kind of when psychology was in its infancy. But he looked at all these archetypes, like, so the old woman, like, the villain, the hero, all this. But like, he had one that was called like the shadow. And the shadow was like that kind of dark, almost dark side of us that, we kind of never want to face and stuff like that. But I think what online, like anonymity and stuff online has allowed people to flirt with that shadow, to let it loose, unhinged, where no one would ever do that in real life, because they get punched out, or sure, like they get arrested, or like something like that.
Right.
And I think that's what we're dealing with, like this kind of weird hodgepodge of people behaving in ways that isn't them online. And then you get this like really skewed perspective of what like people are, and this side and that side. And I just don't know when the penny is going to drop, where it's just like, can we stop this? Can we all just get back to being like, normal people that we were probably in, the 90s and early noughties and stuff like that, before the internet kind of ruined everything.
Right. And, I think even before the internet ruined everything. And I agree with what you're saying. Is I think people become keyboard warriors, and they get a little more brave when they're sitting behind their keyboard than they would be in real life, in person, saying something to someone's face as opposed to typing it online. But you would see that too, and you still continue to see it today with drivers on the road, where my belief in this, and I don't know, I have no scientific background to prove this or anything, but it's just my belief on this, is that it's not necessarily a driver getting mad at another driver. It's a driver getting mad at the inanimate object of the vehicle that drove in front of them and cut them off. It's not necessarily the driver, because think about, like, if you were walking in a crowded area and someone bumped into you, or kind of stepped in front of you, or whatever, you're not going to start ripping their head off and screaming in their face and whatever, because it's just another person. It's like, oh, you bumped into me, no big deal. Sorry, and you move on and whatever. It's not a big deal. But someone, gets a little close to you on the street, you'll start going crazy. You're not really yelling at the person. You're yelling at the vehicle, I believe. And if you look at cars, the front of the car, the two headlights, and kind of the way the grill almost looks like a face. And so it's like you're
an aggressive
kind of
sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes an aggressive face, and so now you have that personality that you can go and attack, and you feel like you're attacking someone, but you're really just yelling at a car, and it's kind of stupid.
Yeah, and I reckon sometimes as well that, like, when you get behind a wheel, like, there's a certain level of danger, and that you're there's a certain level of an increase in arousal.
Sure.
So your adrenaline goes up and stuff like that. So people are a bit more they're a bit sharper, a bit gnarlier, because like you're
on edge,
kind of flooded a bit like some of these chemicals.
Sure.
But Scott, I want to go into your story. Because I think it's so interesting, and like, I can't recommend the book more. I'm going to I'll link it down and all. It's just like such an honest, like really, kind of book. I think it brings to, it's like a homage to your brother as well. Like, I think it's obviously, it's coming from you, it's your story, but I think it's such a beautiful homage to your brother, and we will get into that. But I want to start, like, so both you and your brother, both went into accountancy, but you did grow up kind of in a house that, as you mentioned in it, that had a fascination with kind of anything military, but loved your country. But how do, I suppose, two guys studying accountancy, kind of go into, make it into military life? Like, give us that story. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think if you were to look at, like, who we were as kids and even teenagers and even in our college years, you would not necessarily pick that career path for us. That was something I think was a surprise to everybody, and especially me, because when I ended up joining the military, I had already graduated college. I was already working in an accounting firm, and it was just not the thing I think anyone saw coming.
Arousal up.
No, exactly. Yeah, well, there definitely was not a whole lot of arousal going on at crunching numbers, but yeah. So I was in college when 9/11 happened, and I had actually considered just dropping out of school right away when that happened, just to go join the military. And I realized that I was already partway through school, and I said, if I drop out now, I know myself, I'm not coming back, and I'm not going to get that degree. I'm not going to finish it up. And I said, what, I feel like I'm already partway through. I might as well finish the degree. If there's going to be a fight, there'll still be a fight going on after I graduate. And if not, then I missed it. And oh well. So turns out there was quite a long fight afterwards. So anyways, I graduate from college, and my brother, he joined the military. In the United States, we have it's called the National Guard, which is kind of part-time soldiers. So 1 week in a month and 2 weeks out of the year is when we do the military training in the National Guard. I believe probably over on your side, it's like the Territorial Army or something like that. I think that's kind of what.
I think a reserve army. Okay. They call it.
Sure.
Yeah, the reserves.
Okay. Yeah. So similar concept. I think it is what you guys might have. I might be confusing it with another country or something too, but anyways, yeah, so he joined up and did that, and all of a sudden, so he was my younger brother. My little brother becomes this soldier who, all my life I was looking up to military and law enforcement and all the first responders and everyone. Like those are the people that I would look up to as a kid, and all of a sudden my little brother became one of these people, and so I was incredibly proud of him for making that decision. And then maybe 9 months or so after he joined, I started hearing these reports in the news that the military was struggling to meet their recruiting numbers, and they had a quota for how many people they needed to recruit, and they weren't going to make it. And I got really upset and really angry at how they were just not making that number. I said, where were all these people after 9/11? There were people who were knocking down the door at recruiters' office trying to join. They had too many people back then, and now they don't have enough. And it was just 3-4 years later after 9/11, and I said, this just doesn't make any sense to me. And so then I realized, like, I was one of those people who was thinking about joining the military, and I still had yet to do anything as far as joining the military goes. And so I said, well, I'm still young enough. I'm fit enough. Like I wasn't in great shape, but I could get there with a little bit of work.
Yeah.
And I said, so why not me? Why don't I join too? And so, that's kind of how the two of us got into the military. That was kind of the spark that, or my brother joining was the spark that kind of got me, reminded me of my interest in joining the military. For him, he got into a little bit of trouble when he was in college. His grades were not where they should be. He kind of took to the partying life a little bit too much, and he decided that's not the path that he wanted to go down. And so he said he recognized that he needed the discipline and structure. And so what he did is he dropped out of the school that he was going to and went to another school, which was a kind of a military academy. It's where they have like military training in addition to your regular classes. And so he got a lot of the discipline there, and he met a soldier who was also attending that school, who introduced him to the unit in the National Guard that he ended up joining, and kind of just brought him along for one of the training days, just to say, hey, if you like it, you can join. If not, no big deal. And so he ended up liking it, and he ended up joining. And so he kind of jumped in, head first into the military, and ended up deploying to Iraq and then eventually Afghanistan. But that was really, for me, the spark that kind of set things in motion.
Was the spark. Like, would you have ever imagined, like, jump back there to 1999, and I don't think you would have been in college at this stage, but like you would have been in high school, getting ready to leave high school. Would you have ever imagined that you like yourself would go on to the military, or your brother? Like, was that?
I don't know if I ever would have dismissed it for my brother. But for me, I remember military recruiters coming into our high school and talking to our class, and just trying to see if there were any potential recruits in our class, and they got some people, but I remember that they I would keep getting calls from like Navy recruiters and Army recruiters, and they would just keep calling and calling and calling. Eventually they stopped calling because I just started hanging up on them, and I was like, no, I don't want this. Like, stop calling. Like, I don't know what you think you're going to get out of me, but I'm not joining. And it's like, I don't want anything to do with this. And the funny thing was, just a couple of years later, my mindset shifted 180 degrees, where now I was like, you know what, this actually sounds like something I might want to do. But so I don't know if I ever thought that I would have joined necessarily. When I was a kid, we would watch like kind of military themed movies and stuff, and kind of play soldier and stuff in the backyard. We'll, find sticks and use them as guns and whatnot. And so we would do those kind of things. But I think that's kind of normal for a boy to go out and play in the mud and get dirty and pretend like they're a soldier, cops and robbers and those kind of things. You do those types of things, and but I don't know that I necessarily thought that I would ever do anything with that as far as like a career going forward.
Yeah. Uh, and I think that's probably the thing. Like, and like I think even a lot of people that maybe might join, like, mightn't get, like, they mightn't see active, actual conflict, or go on to active duty. But, uh, you know, I know you do your basic training and all. And sorry, I don't want to steal the story
No, you're
here,
fine.
but when you would have went over, man, was it 2010?
Yeah.
Like, probably one of the most brutal years, I think, from what I've read online and all. Like, that was absolutely like hell. I can only imagine. It's what it's described. Like, a lot of people reporting it, and it was a bad year, like 2009, 2010.
Yeah. 2010, I believe, I know for Americans, but it might be all of the coalition forces that were over in Afghanistan. I believe 2010 was the year with the highest number of casualties. And so it was.
What was causing that? Sorry to put in, Scott. Like, what was it? Just that the jihadis and all had got like more sophisticated? Had they bigger numbers? Was it more IEDs? Like, I do see IEDs a lot mentioned, but like,
Yeah.
any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it. And they were smart. They would learn different tactics that we would use, and they would even so much as the patches that we would wear on our sleeves. They would get to know, oh, that unit is maybe infantry, and that unit is something else, and so maybe that unit might be a little bit easier to attack. So we're going to go attack those people instead of these other ones who are going to put up a bigger fight. And so they started to get smarter. I mean, at that point we had been there for almost a decade, and so they kind of got to know what we were doing, and so that was probably part of it. I know we also had like a surge of troops that we sent over there, and so just higher number of people is just going to unfortunately result in a higher number of casualties a lot of times, and so that was probably part of it too. So it's probably no one factor. It was probably a combination of factors, and to be perfectly honest, I think the rules of engagement that we had were too strict as far as when we were able to engage and fight back and things like that. There was some restraints placed on us that we kind of had to go through a series of escalation steps to before we were able to actually engage in a target. So it that could have had been a factor as well in the whole situation.
Do you know what's interesting there? Like, I thought war was war. Like, I thought everyone just goes out there and you shoot whatever. And I think it was Sniper One. I think that was the book I read, where I kind of went into. I was like, what are these rules of engagement? What's that even mean?
Right.
And I was like, I just thought like people go, both forces are out there and fighting, but obviously it's kind of it's a bit different because you're in like cities where there's civilians as well, and there's a gray area, as we've talked about. Yeah,
it's definitely a big gray area because sure, there's women and children, there's males who are not participating, and those who were we call them enemy combatants, they didn't wear uniforms. They dress the same as everybody else, and so they may be carrying a weapon, and they may have it kind of tucked under some clothing or something. So they would look just like any other person until the weapon comes out and they start shooting, and that's when you finally know, oh, that's a threat, that's a problem. And going back to our earlier conversation of like people coming back and the PTSD and all that hypervigilance, of course, because everybody was a threat as far as you were concerned. You're looking at everybody, women, children, males, everybody was a potential threat because there could have even been a male who was dressed up as a woman to kind of throw us off, and then got close enough to cause some damage, and you're always looking out for those types of things. So of course you're going to have that kind of hypervigilance going forward.
Yeah, like I wonder what their PTS is like because they can see the enemy, like where it's very clear. You're going around in uniform, you're in battalions or whatever it is. Yeah, I wonder what theirs is because their threat isn't. Well, maybe they do have threats because there could be air support coming in,
sure,
acting like that, but. But anyway, that tangent, I don't want to go on a tangent there.
Sure.
But yeah, Scott. So back to go through. Actually, one of the funny bits in the book I found, as a bit of comic relief in it, was the April Fool's joke. It's just like, because that's kind of sometimes what I think when I think of military, and I don't know if it's because movies have made me like that or listening to podcasts and books, but there is this like level of kind of joking and stuff. But that was a kind of funny scenario, but it was rare. I think you mentioned like that was the one time I think one of the instructors laughed. Or
yeah, it was definitely rare to have the. So just for the listeners, the story that you're referring to is when I was in basic training. April Fool's Day, April 1st was the one of the days that I was in training, and that morning we got woken up. The drill sergeants were screaming at us, and they told us that there's a hallway outside of the barracks. There's like two ways that you can come into the barracks, and like this one hallway, they said that someone had written some graffiti on the wall that one of the drill sergeants, I forget the exact phrase that was in there, but it was something, about his sexuality and questioning his sexuality and that type of thing. Let's just leave it at that, keep it, family friendly maybe. But the drill sergeants came in and they were screaming at us, and they were like, who did it? Who wrote it? Fess up now, or everybody's getting in trouble. And of course, nobody actually wrote it. There was nothing actually written on the walls. And so the entire day we were getting the life smoked out of us. We were doing so many exercises, push-ups and sit-ups, and they had this PT field. It was basically just like a sand in a pit, and where you go out and you do your morning exercises and everything. And they had us kind of rolling in that. We're already drenched in sweat, and so then now we're rolling in sand, and so it's sticking to us like a sugar on a cookie. But and it's all over us. And it got to the point where we just, like, some people they were starting to break, and they just wanted it to end, and so they started accusing other people of doing the graffiti. And the other person, I didn't do it. No, it was that. It must have been that person. And then fist fights started breaking out. And I think at that point, the drill sergeant's like, okay, I think we've taken this a little bit too far. Let's not keep going anyway. But the very next day, they completely dropped it. They didn't even mention it. And when we would, like, later on, we asked, like, did you ever find out like what was happening? They pretended like it never happened. And so it's like, are we going crazy? Did we imagine this happening? This day from hell?
Yeah. Oh, that's a bit of comic relief, really, with it.
I can laugh at it now, but at the time it was like, seriously, someone just fess up, because this is awful.
I'd say, and the jokery, like, because like sometimes I've read some of the essay kind of, or the kind of British military and the SAS, like but even kind of when you read like some of the special forces in America, there's always this like level of, I don't know, like humor is probably maybe masking some of the extremity of and trauma of what people's going through.
Yeah,
it's like, it's kind of a way maybe to deal with like the extreme stress.
For sure. And the term that we often use is, it's like dark humor. We'll joke about death and losing a limb and getting maimed, or blowing up or getting shot or whatever. Even there's a medal that's awarded to people who are wounded in action in a combat scenario. It's the Purple Heart, and we jokingly referred to it as the enemy's marksmanship badge. So we have those kind of like dark, it's like, to someone on the outside looking in, it's like, that's a sick way to look at it, but I mean, it's not wrong.
Yeah. Is that what the purple, I've heard of the Purple Heart before. I never knew what it was actually for. Is that,
so the Purple Heart
in battle?
Yeah, if you get wounded in combat, through enemy action, not like if you shot yourself in the foot or something. It's through enemy engagement, you're awarded the Purple Heart for that, and so that's what that medal is for. But we kind of joke about it and say it's the enemy's marksmanship badge, and it's funny, in a sick, twisted kind of way. But like everything else, it's kind of things get elevated, when you're in those kind of environments where just normal, dad jokes maybe or puns are not quite as funny, and they don't quite do it for you. So you need to kind of step your game up a little bit and make it a little sick and twisted, and then it starts to get a little more fun.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably that comic relief probably helps as well.
Sure.
But Scott, so you turn blue, which was a new term actually. I'd never heard of turning blue before, the turning blue ceremony. And I suppose even actually give the listeners a quick blurb on what turning blue is, because I'd
Yeah,
never
sure.
actually heard it.
Yeah, and it's not from holding my breath or anything like that. It's it's a term in the U.S. anyways. The infantry, all the different jobs in the military, they have like a color kind of associated with them, and for the infantry it's blue. And when you graduate from your infantry training, you get a cord that you wear on your shoulder on your dress uniform, that it's a blue kind of like knotted cord that goes on your shoulder. And so when you turn blue, that's when you first receive that cord. And so that was a kind of a special moment. Obviously, you go through a lot of training, a lot of difficult moments to get to that point. And for me, it was even more special because my brother that I was talking about just a minute ago, he was in Iraq while I was in basic training. So he was already a soldier. He was already serving, and he had been deployed to Iraq when I was in basic training. Where he was, this was 2006. He was in Ramadi, which was just a terrible area to be in. It was probably like one of the worst places in the world that you could be,
Was it really?
as far as danger. Yeah, at that point in time. And so, of course I was concerned for him.
Yeah.
I had a lot of worry and stuff like that for him. But he came home, I want to say maybe it was a week or so before my graduation from basic training and everything. And so he was able to be there, and he was able to kind of present me with that blue cord and in that turning blue ceremony. So that was a special moment because, I wasn't expecting him actually to be there. I thought he was still going to be in Iraq by the time I graduated. But they ended up coming home. He just made it just in time.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in the book as well, Scott, like that he kind of changed a bit, you felt, or he didn't even talk about, like, because
Yeah.
obviously I don't know, like, Ramadi, but, like, I think from the book, and I actually looked it up since, and it seems like it was, I think there's a few movies kind of on it as well. Like, he didn't open up too much, even though you were kind of going in, you were going through your ranks and all, you were kind of probably preparing and stuff. But, like, why do you think that was? Do you think it's just like kind of trying to deal with, like, the chaos of over there?
Yeah, and I think he just saw a lot of combat while he was over there, and it was a lot to process and deal with. When he came home, this was before I finished basic training, so I wasn't there for this. But my parents told me that when he came home, he said, "I'm going to give you an hour. You can ask all the questions you want about what I did over there and all the things, whatever happened, and then I never want to talk about it again." And so that's kind of how he dealt with it. With which, looking back on it, that's probably not the best way to deal with it, not the healthiest way, but that was his way of dealing with it. And he really didn't talk much about it, except for.
And did you ask much? Like, were you curious, or were you kind of like, you respected that he's not talking about it, I don't want to probe too much?
It was a little bit of both. I was curious,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to. I didn't want to set him off and have bring up bad memories or things that he just didn't want to talk about. And he was a little bit more open, I think, maybe with me, just because I also was in the Army, and so he would tell me things. Maybe it was his way of kind of looking out for me, like, hey, I already went through this hell. Why should you have to go through it too? And so he was trying to tell me some things, but it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot that he would open up and tell me about. There was a book though that was written about the time that he was in Ramadi. It was written about Ramadi during that time period from another unit's perspective, so it wasn't his unit that necessarily was involved in that story that was in that book, but a lot of the places that they talked about and the things that were taking place there were places that he was familiar with, and so he wrote actually like a short story that he called My Side of whatever the name of the book was, and he just went through and, page by page, he said, okay, yeah, they talked about this. This is where such and such happened. And so it was kind of maybe a cathartic way for him to kind of get some of that out, without necessarily verbally saying it, but he was able to write it out, and it was something that will live on now because he was able to put that into words, put it, ink to paper and get that out there. So, in a way, I think that was helpful for him to be able to kind of process some of that stuff. And I know writing a book, from my own perspective, it can stir up a lot of memories, but it also can be helpful as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that what he did was helpful for him.
Definitely. He seemed to get deployed very quick. Like, he joined them, was it 2005? He was there straight away in 2006. Like, is that normal?
No, it's really not. What had happened was the unit that he was joining was already deployed to Iraq when he finished his training. And a couple months into their deployment, they had suffered some casualties, whether it was injuries or some people unfortunately were killed, and they were starting to need more people to come in and kind of fill in the ranks and build up their numbers. So because he was still going to college, they told him when he joined that he would not be compelled to go overseas until he finished his degree, if that's what he wanted. But they were looking for people, and he volunteered to go overseas. So it wasn't normal, but he chose to. So he kind of
volunteer. I think
put that on himself.
Said in the book. But that was because there was a lot of like casualties that needed the troops coming in.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And so, with your own experience, was it 2005? I think you went. You went into was it the Connecticut? Or I could get that wrong.
Yeah, no,
it's different state, but it was a National Guard, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was National Guard as well. Yeah, so both of us were in the National Guard. And for the listeners who are unfamiliar with that, every state in America has their own National Guard. And so I was in the Connecticut Army National Guard. He was in the Vermont Army National Guard. But both of our units actually end up falling under the same chain of command. It's from without getting into too many technical military terms, we were controlled kind of by the same people up at top, and so when we eventually deployed in 2010, we were on the same deployment. My brother and I were deployed together, despite being in separate units. We all kind of were deployed together.
Wild.
Yeah,
that's wild that you both end up on the same deployment.
Yeah, and it's with the National Guard, especially being state focused, so everybody who is in a certain National Guard, they're from that general area. They may not necessarily be from the same state, but they're from that general area. And in the New England area in the U.S. Is relatively small. So my brother, he lived in Connecticut, but he was in the Vermont Army National Guard. It's just a few hours of a drive away so it's not like a tremendous burden to be able to go and train with that unit that he was with. But because we're so close, if let's say two brothers or cousins or other folks from the same area all wanted to join the National Guard, they're probably going to be in the same unit. So while it's not terribly common in the active duty military, or maybe not as common, it's a lot more common in the National Guard just because of just how close everybody is. Yeah. Especially a small state like Connecticut is a relatively small state. There's not a whole lot of option as far as National Guard units to join, and so you're gonna join whichever ones are available, and so that's how that ends up happening. I actually had several sets of brothers in the unit that I was in, stationed on the same base, even, and so that was kind of good and bad. Good because you got your brother there, and that's
Yeah.
nice. But bad because if something really bad happened, then you end up having potentially both brothers being injured or killed or something like that, and so that's not a great thing either. So so it's got its pros and cons, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of people think about the movie Saving Private Ryan, and they say I can't believe that they would let you two go over at the same time. It's like it's more common than you'd think.
Yeah. And like, what this must like, with your mom and dad, were they like raw with nerves, like a worry, like were they? Yeah, what was going through their minds? Like two sons going must be kind of like on the same deployment, 2010.
Yeah.
It's like deep into the war. It's a bad time. Like what was going through their heads, or did they talk about it?
I know that they were proud of us for joining. But of course, like any parent and anyone who has children, they're going to be nervous about them going into a dangerous situation, no matter what the situation.
Yeah.
Never mind being combat. If I know my son is going to be going into a bad neighborhood, I'm going to be nervous. So
That's it, man.
I can only imagine just how nervous they were when we both were going to Afghanistan, which was, at the time, it was probably one of the worst places, if not the worst place in the world to be. And having both of us there at the same time is, one is bad enough, but then two, that's that had to be tough for them. I can't speak for them directly because I wasn't there with them to know exactly what they were feeling or going through or whatever, and I don't think they really wanted us to know either, because
that's
then
the thing
now we're worried about them while we have to worry about ourselves too, and that's not the best place for our minds to be either. So to their credit, I think they kind of kept some of that from us to kind of protect us a bit so that we didn't worry about them. Although I think we kind of knew that because we also didn't tell them everything that was going on with us either when we were over there, because we didn't want to worry them more than
the better.
Yeah.
And Scott, even getting on then to your deployment, so you touch down, like how surreal. I think in the book you're talking about Bagram, where there was like luxuries. There was like I
Yeah.
could not believe this. This blew my mind as well. Where there was like fast food places,
Yeah.
or it was luxuries compared to where you were going on to next.
Sure. Yeah. When we first landed at Bagram, it was luxury was I think the right word for it, because there were fast food restaurants. There was a Harley Davidson motorcycle dealership there, where people actually could go in there. They could buy the motorcycle with their money that they were saving from deployment, and by the time they got home, there'd be a motorcycle sitting in their driveway, waiting for them. And so, like, that to me was crazy.
Hopefully they got a discount.
I would hope that they would. That motorcycles are not my thing, so I didn't even entertain that. Going in there to check any of that out. But there was a lot of things that I wasn't expecting either. But we got there, and Bagram's like a little city. They had roads and all sorts of buildings all over the place, and if you didn't know where you're going, you could easily get lost because it was just such a big base to be on. And so you kind of stuck close to where you're supposed to be, so you didn't end up getting lost. You didn't want to go wander too far off, where you were. But yeah, they had all sorts of stuff there. Then we moved on, went to another base, which was not quite as nice as Bagram. This was Jalalabad, which, like I said, was not quite as nice, but it still had some luxuries that I wasn't expecting. A couple, shops and things like that they had there, which was a little bizarre to me. But hey, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then when we finally got to the base that we were going to be at for the duration of the deployment, it was, I don't want to say it was bare bones, like it had nothing there. There were the barracks that we stayed in were basically plywood huts. They used plywood to make the walls and the floors and the roof and everything, and that's what we had. There were bathrooms and there's showers and stuff like that. So it's not like we were just out in the desert in the middle of nowhere. So we had those types of luxuries, but that was about it. There really wasn't anything else on that base, and there was nothing really else for gosh, miles and miles around us, because it was just kind of out there. I think there was one tree near where we were, which to me was just so bizarre. Coming from New England, there's trees everywhere, and then going there, and I think there was one tree outside of our base. It just never got water, and so for a tree to survive, it would have to have really, really deep roots. And
Yeah.
so that was a little strange to me too. But yeah, we were stationed right on the right near the Pakistan border, so we're about 2 miles or so away from the Pakistan border. Um, and that was, um, yeah, our job there was really just to secure that border area, because that the main road that came through there was where most of the NATO supplies would come through. Most of them would come through on cargo ships. Afghanistan's a landlocked country, so cargo ships aren't going to make it there. So they stop in Pakistan. They get on, taken off the ship, put it onto a truck, and that's how they drive through. I want to say probably about 80% of the NATO supplies were coming through there, through that route. And so our job was really just to secure that area, make sure that the trucks were able to get through. Occasionally the Pakistanis would shut down the border on their end. So we were kind of there as like a show of force kind of thing. Not that we're necessarily going to go to war with Pakistan, but
Yeah.
they were a little
Just in case.
more lenient when we were there than when we weren't. And so, our job was also to, look at the people coming to and from across the border, because the Taliban had like training bases, and they had other stuff in Pakistan, and people would frequently cross the border to come back into Afghanistan. So we would check the pedestrian traffic coming through, and vehicle traffic to see, people bringing in weapons or, anything like that. And so we would just randomly check people, and, do our part to kind of keep people from getting any further into the country, kind of
And
stopping
is the
them there.
border fairly porous? Like, is there
Yeah.
much like checks going in, or is it like kind of it blends into one?
It's interesting because it kind of like funnels down. There's these big mountains on either side of like the border area where we were, and the mountains they're not easy walking. It's not like you can go for a
Say.
leisurely stroll on these mountains. And so most people, if they're gonna come and cross the border, they're gonna come through this border control checkpoint. And there's a fence that runs pretty far out as well. And so if they're going to come through, they're going to come through that main area. Occasionally we would see people kind of walking up on top of the mountains, and those were people, they were out of our reach. We couldn't get to them. I mean, we could, but we'd need like helicopters and stuff like that to get to them in any sort of time. And by the time the helicopters got there, they were going to be long gone anyways. So we didn't do much with those people. For the most part, they came through, but it was relatively porous too, because there were areas where people were able to get around and get through the border without us knowing that they were there. And
And then people on the mountain, Scott, like, were they watching you? Were they like, were they trying to threaten you? Like,
yeah, it's a good question. A lot of times we don't know, because they were. If you ever look up a mountain and see a person at the top of the mountain, they're so tiny, and I couldn't tell, like, are they looking at us with binoculars? Are they looking at us? Do they have cameras? Do they have weapons? You just can't tell really what they have, and sometimes it's just people who are walking and they're trying to get to their village. I think I described it in the book, like that the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, a lot of the people who live there, they don't necessarily recognize the border, because it was drawn by people who didn't live there. It was, I believe it was British who drew the border between the two countries. And if you think about it, like if you lived in your town and someone just came through and just drew a line and said, okay, this part of this town is going to be part of Ireland, and this part of the town is going to be part of some other new country that, whatever. You're like, the hell it is, no, it's not. This is still the town I grew up in, and that I've lived in all my life, maybe, and you're going to look at it that way, and that's the way those people were looking at it too, and they didn't really care necessarily about the border, and they're cousins might live right up over the border from
Yeah.
where the line was drawn. And well, I'm going to go visit my cousin and I'm just going to go walk over there. And I don't really care about having a passport or any
Yeah.
documentation. I'm just going to go walk over there. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the attitude that people had, in that general area. Yeah. So it was, just a culture shock, I think, to just see the way that people lived and, the housing and the culture. It was just all different. We learned a little bit about it, but until you actually see it in person, it's just a totally different world.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, and even like one of my questions is going to be like, because with basic training, you even got hypothermia on one of the outings or the missions. I'm not sure what you actually call them, but like, how much did that prepare you then for the boots on the ground then there? Like, did you feel when you got there you were prepared, or can anything prepare you? Like you mentioned the culture shock there. Can anything prepare you for the I suppose being so overwhelmed by everything and so new?
Yeah, I think we were well prepared. We had some good training. The people who would conduct some of the training before we were deployed, they actually brought people who were Afghans from Afghanistan to the United States to kind of participate in some of the training. So they spoke the language that we were going to be interacting with. I didn't know the language, but I had to figure out a way to communicate with them in, me speaking English and
It could be survival.
Yeah, for
Life
sure.
and death, maybe.
Exactly. And just the way that they lived and everything. And so, they were there to kind of help train us, to help us help them, really, because they wanted us to help their country and their families and everything have a better life. And so that's what they were there for. And so, they were, I think they took the job seriously, and they tried to help prepare us as best as they could. Obviously, combat is chaotic, and you can't account for every different type of situation and scenario that might take place, but you can prepare for some of the more likely things. And the more training you have, the better prepared you are, the easier of a time you're gonna have when something actually goes wrong, because you've already rehearsed the problems that can come up. And what happens when someone gets shot, or what happens when you run out of ammunition, or what happens when certain ththings happen. You've already gone through those scenarios over and over and over again, and so it almost becomes second nature. It just is easy for you to go with the flow and figure things out on the fly, as opposed to, this is the first time you've ever even considered that someone might get shot. Now what do you do? I don't know. I'm going to probably panic and not do things the right way. And so, they did do quite a bit of training. The one thing I was not prepared for, though, was when we landed at our base. So we were flown in on helicopters, and we landed there in the middle of the night. So it was pitch black. We had our night vision goggles on, and so all you see is like just everything's green, through the night vision goggles. And getting off the helicopter, I didn't know that the base that we were on had a landing pad for helicopters inside the walls of the base. And so I thought, as we're getting off the helicopter, that we're just walking out into the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
thinking that there could be someone sitting behind that rock over there with, a rifle or an RPG or, some other, weapon or whatever. And I'm getting off the helicopter, and I am scared, and I'm like, what is going on? Because I don't want to I don't want to say like I'm gonna stay away from any kind of combat, but I didn't want my first combat experience to be at night, in the very first time I'm stepping foot onto the ground at night, where I'm in unfamiliar territory. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what's going on. I kind of want to get a feel for the area and the lay of the land and what's going on. And the next morning when the sun was up, I was able to look out, and I was like, oh, there's a landing pad right inside of the walls of the base. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that's not that wasn't so bad. I was scared for nothing, but it was good. I was
That's
alert.
against the heart pumping straight away anyway.
Yeah. Wasn't complacent for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. So Scott, you're on, doing the border security, Pakistan, Afghanistan border. Where's Stephen then? Your brother Stephen, where's he at this stage?
Yeah, he was probably, I don't know the exact distance, but he was probably maybe 80 or 90 miles away from where I was, which, if in Afghanistan, you might as well be on the moon at that kind of distance, because it's just so mountainous, the terrain and stuff. So we never had an opportunity to see each other or do anything like that when we were in Afghanistan. But the area he was in was a little bit more dangerous than where I was, from what I eventually learned. They were getting in firefights much more frequently. Their supplies were dwindling because the supply convoys that would try to deliver supplies to their base would get attacked and blown up and stuff. So they even minor things like food, they weren't getting regular food supplies, so they were having to eat the MRE rations, the meals ready to eat that are not the best tasting, but they'll sustain you, but
Yeah.
you, eventually you may not want to continue to be sustained if you have to keep eating those. Um, but yeah, so like he was having kind of a rough time, over where he was, and for me, I don't know if this was a protective mechanism or what, but I kind of sort of felt like he was going to be fine. I knew he had a dangerous job. I knew he was in a dangerous place. He's going to be fine. He's going to come home. He's going to, continue life and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it was just like, I never thought, even though I knew the job that he had was dangerous, it was the same job I had, and I knew the area that he was in was dangerous, I never thought anything bad could possibly happen. And I think that for me, it was kind of a protective mechanism, because if I was worried about him, then I'm not going to be worried about me. And so I kind of just put anything about what he had to deal with kind of out of my memory.
Again, that fateful day comes, which is probably, I don't know, like, is it hard for you, like, to talk about? Because obviously it's such a deeply, you know, traumatic and like deeply emotional and personal experience for you. And like, I've listened to you on other podcasts talking about it and stuff, but like, before you even go in, like, is it hard to talk about it, or like, where are you with Stephen's story?
It is hard from time to time, but for me, certain days are harder than others to talk about. Yesterday actually was the anniversary of his death, the 15th anniversary. So, so yesterday, if we were having this conversation yesterday, I
Yeah.
probably would have had a little harder time, because yesterday, just full transparency, just to be honest, I didn't have a good day yesterday. It was
Damn, man. Well, that's
I was not
expected.
feeling great, and it was just rough. And but when I have conversations like this, I kind of get my head in the game and say, like, look, he is no longer here. And I know this is kind of like a spoiler thing right now, but I'm going to just kind of jump into it anyways. But he's no longer here. He's not able to tell his story, whether he wanted to or not, ever. He can't. That option was taken away from him. He's no longer with us. And so I feel like people die two deaths. I believe this. You die when you physically die, and then you also die the last time
Name's
anyone
Skull.
speaks your name. And so, as long as I'm capable, I'm going to continue to talk about him, talk about his sacrifices and experiences, and I'm gonna do that because I want to make sure that his name, his memory lives on, and
And man,
is
you've
not.
done that like
Yeah,
phenomenally with that book. Like, as I said, it's a homage. Like, I would have never learned about, Steven DeLuzio unless that book. And it's
sure.
it's such a great book. Like, I will link it in for the readers to go listen to, because I think it's such a heartfelt book. So, like, in a way, you have preserved his legacy, I feel, like, hugely. Because that, we get your story, but we get his story just as equally,
Sure.
you
Yeah, and,
know?
and that's part of what I wanted to do with this book was, yeah, of course, tell my story and what I experienced and I went through, because I was there, and I can talk about those things because I know about them. But I also wanted to make sure that his story was not lost to time and to history. I mean, there's going to come a point in time when I don't care who you are, I don't care how famous you are or whatever. There's going to come a point in time when someone stops talking about you and doesn't, continue that conversation. And for some of us, it's going to be a lot shorter period of time than others. But if I can extend this by a few decades or 100 years or so by continuing to talk about my brother and telling other people about him and having a book out there with his name in print, then his memory will live on, and that's for me that's an important thing.
Yeah, and I think it's a beautiful way to honor someone because, like books do kind of last forever or like
Yeah,
last a long time. Photographs, all these things kind of not as much, but like a book is distributable. People
yeah,
can read it and people can understand it. It's a bit more of a commitment as well to sit down with a book for 8 hours. There's a level of intent coming from the reader and coming from the author.
sure.
And I think that's what really makes it magic. You're going on this 8 hour journey, and especially in the modern world when everyone's a 15-second clip on a social media, people are scrolling on. So it's almost an intimate experience. It's a commitment. I'm going to sit with you for 8 hours, and you give me a good story, and that's what you did in that book. But you also got to honor your brother,
Yeah,
which is beautiful.
and that's why the way I wrote the book, I wanted to start with like telling a little bit about our background and our upbringing and stuff, and so the reader actually gets an understanding of who we were as people, not just a nameless face that shows up on the news when there's a tragedy, that someone will see for 15 seconds and then on to the next story, and then they forget all about that person. I want to give a little more story and history and background to who we were and what um, uh, and hopefully give you some level of emotion when you read
Yeah.
the story. Emotions could be good and bad too, right? And there was, like you mentioned, there were some funny things in the book, and I try to keep it balanced. I like to joke around. I like to have some humor, and so I injected some humor in there too. But there's some serious things too, and you may read the book and you may actually shed some tears from the way it was written. My intention is not to make anybody sad necessarily, but I do want to impress upon people that there are real people with real lives, real families that care about them, who are sent out to these combat zones, and unfortunately, the reality of war is that they don't all come home, and that's um, not to say that I'm anti-war, anything like that. All I'm trying to say is that if you're going to send somebody off to war, you better make damn sure that it's for a good reason, because we don't want to
War is
lose people
war,
for. Yeah,
that's the kind of nature of it. I think like what really caught me in the book, probably most, was just literally the finality of it.
yeah,
Like, so I think maybe, and this is probably uh, too accustomed to like Hollywood, and where, someone gets shot and like, the whole movie starts then and it's trying to get them, trying to, get out of the situation and keep them alive. It was just the finality of it. And that, like, it kind of catches you that, like, it just shot and that's it. Like that, real life war isn't Saving Private, or it's not any of these movies where there's like a storyline and there's a big adventure. No, it was just, and I think that's what really got me.
right. Yeah, and so with him, for the listeners who haven't read the book yet or heard the story before, is exactly what you just said. He was on a patrol with his unit, and he was in the front of his patrol, so he's kind of like the first guy out in front of everybody, and they kind of came around this area, and there were some of the enemy folks who were waiting for them, and um, they were ambushed, and he, unfortunately, being the first one there, he was the first one shot, and he was shot and killed instantly. And there was really not much you could do for someone like that. There's no, let's give him CPR, or let's bandage him up and put a tourniquet on it or something to kind of stop the bleeding or anything like that. It's like when you're gone, and there's really not much left to do. And so that was kind of early on that mission that they were on. They were heading into a particular village that they knew was a difficult area. They had been there before, and they had seen kind of the bad stuff that goes on in that village. And they just happened to get surprised and ambushed from a place that they just weren't expecting it. So a few people kind of ran over to where he was. In the military, we have a thing that you never leave a fallen soldier. So you always, go and recover. If someone is killed in action, you always do your best to recover everybody that you can. And so people ran over to kind of go, collect him, and that mission went from a kind of seek out the enemy type of mission to a rescue and like recovery mission, and trying to recover his body and get him out of there. And in doing so, one of the soldiers who was carrying him, because they had a makeshift litter, and they were carrying him. I think there's probably four or so guys who were carrying him, and one of them was killed as he was carrying him out. The enemy shot an RPG towards them, and he had taken a hit from that RPG, and unfortunately that killed him too. And so now they have two soldiers that they have to try to get out, and there's other injuries as well. It's not just those two people who were killed, and there's other people who are injured, still alive but injured nonetheless. And it just became a terribly difficult situation for them, and there's no reinforcements or backup coming to help them right away. Eventually people did come to help them, but it wasn't an immediate thing where they got people out there within the first couple minutes. It took some time to get people out there to help out. And so what they ended up doing was they were on kind of like the side of a mountain, and the village was just kind of at the base of the mountain. There was actually a house that was built into the mountain, and so they kind of just slid down the mountain with the bodies, as carefully as they could, to still obviously be respectful of them and everything. And they slid down onto the roof of one of these houses, and they worked their way down. Got into the house, and they used that house as kind of a stronghold to protect themselves a bit. They had the walls of the house and stuff to protect against the enemy fire and the bullets and everything. But that was the best they could do, because they were exposed. They were out in the open. There wasn't much for them to do, and they were having some trouble there. So it was. There's more details to it than that. It was kind of just a overview of that situation, but it was, from the guys that I've talked to and some of the reports that I've read of that day, for those guys, it was absolute hell. It was.
Sounds it.
Yeah, it was just a miserable experience.
It sounds like hell.
Gosh, probably the worst day of their lives, easily.
Yeah. And like Scott, I'd say probably one of the worst days of your life then when you got the news.
Well, for sure. My unit was also out on a mission as well. We were not in that border area where we typically were. We were called out to go to some other villages. There were some reports of Taliban who had stolen some Afghan army uniforms and some weapons and stuff, and so we had some reports that they were hiding out in this particular village, and so we went with the Afghan army to go and try to find these people and find the uniforms and destroy those so that they didn't end up taking them and using them again. And so we were out in this village. We were doing our patrols and everything. It was relatively uneventful. We found a bunch of the uniforms and weapons that we were looking for, so that was good. But of course, nobody claimed any ownership of any of these things, right? And so, like, we don't know who any of these people were, and so, oh no, it's not mine. I don't know where that came from, and that was the kind of attitude that we would get from people. And in a way, looking back on it now, all these years later, it's like I'm talking to my kids sometimes when it's like, who did that thing? It's like, oh, it wasn't me. Yeah, okay, someone did it. It didn't just happen on its own, right? And so that was kind of like what we were getting from these people, and so we ended up just taking the stuff, destroying it, and blowing up the weapons and burning the uniforms so that they couldn't be used going forward. But the Afghan army was the ones who took point, and they were the ones who were going into these buildings and looking for all this stuff. And they did not do the best of job. When we had done some training with them prior to these missions that we were on, and it was during the month of Ramadan, which in the Muslim world is a time when they don't eat or drink anything during the daylight hours, and all the training that we were doing was during the daylight hours. And when the sun goes down, that's when they kind of have a big party, and they eat and they drink and all the things that they do. And so there was no way we were getting them to train at night. So we did some training during the day, but it was also in August in Afghanistan, and it was hot. And we would maybe, if we were lucky, we would get maybe an hour of training out of them. And so it wasn't really much. And so they didn't do the best of job when they were clearing these houses in this village and looking through everything. They skipped over things and everything. And so we eventually found out that they missed a bunch, but it was a little bit too late on that. But when I found out about my brother's death, I was still in the village with my guys, and I got a call from our commanding officer on the radio, and he wanted to speak with me directly, which anyone who knows the chain of command or anything about the chain of command, that is a very unusual thing to happen. Usually any messages will follow through the chain of command, going from the commanding officer down to, work its way down in the levels to the level where I was. But he wanted to speak directly to me. And usually when that kind of thing happens, either something really good happened and you're getting a medal or, some awards or something really bad happened. And I was like, I did not do anything really good that day. So what did I screw up? Why does he want to talk to me? And so I was nervous. I was checking everything, trying to figure out what it was. And eventually I linked up with him, and he told me that my brother's unit had been ambushed and that my brother was hit. And, if you remember back to what I was saying earlier, that I had never really considered that my brother would get seriously injured or killed at all during that deployment. Sure, bumps and bruises, that happens to everyone. He played hockey when he was in high school, and so he's broken bones and he's gotten bruised and all sorts of things like that. And that I'm used to. That's nothing. I wasn't worried about that kind of stuff. But serious injuries or death, that was something I completely put out of my mind.
Yeah.
And so when he told me that my brother was hit, in my mind I thought, okay, well, he's injured somewhere. Where is he? Can I get to him to be there for moral support, or, does he need blood or something? Can I be there to help him in any way? And my commanding officer said, no, you don't understand. He's been killed. And that was a punch to the gut. It just was such a terrible thing. In that moment, I was just picturing life without him and what that would be like. And it was so sad and lonely, and it was just such a terrible experience to go through. And so, like anybody else, I had the same emotions that anyone would have with that type of news, crying and sad and all that kind of stuff. And that's, again, that's a normal human reaction to something like that. And that's, to be expected. What wasn't to be expected, though, was probably maybe 15 or 20 minutes after finding out that my brother was killed, the village that we had just come out of, that we thought was cleared of all the weapons and stuff, we started getting attacked from that village. They were shooting at us. They had RPGs. They had AK-47 type guns that they were shooting at us. And so the grief and the sadness and everything that I was feeling, I had to stuff that down and put that aside, because I needed to go and be a soldier. I couldn't sit there feeling sorry for myself or feeling sorry for my brother or my family or anything like that. I had to go and do my job. And it was really difficult because the sadness that I had turned to rage. I wanted to kill everybody. Any Afghan person that I saw, I wanted to kill him, because I was like, it's because of you people that you couldn't get your country in order, that we had to be here, and that good people like my brother had to die. And I felt so so enraged from that whole experience that, you know, I had these visions, these little flashes in my head of me just running back down into the village and just starting to kill people, regardless if they had a weapon or not. I just want to go kill people. And I quickly snapped out of that, and I realized if I go and do that, I'm not going to make it out alive either. And then my parents are going to have to bury a second son. My wife is going to be a widow. I had a newborn son at home who was going to grow up without a father if I did that. Not to mention the guys that I was responsible for in my unit. They're going to probably have to go down and recover my dead body, and who knows how many more of them are going to
maybe then
get killed too. And like, that's, you know, by some stroke of luck, I end up surviving and one of them doesn't. How do I tell their family that, oh yeah, because I was sad, that's why your loved one's not here anymore? And so, you know, all of that whole thought process that I just described, that probably took the last couple minutes, that was all just a flash in my mind. And it was like just the quickest fleeting thought, but all of that processed
real
within
visceral.
maybe 5 to 10 seconds or so. It was just such a quick thing that took place. But yeah,
it's such an unnatural way to grieve. Like, most people grieve, and it's like, you know, they kind of go off, but to have to jump straight into a firefight or possible firefight and stuff is such a, like, it's such an unusual way to grieve. You know, I can imagine, like, you can't even be numb. You kind of have to jump into action. It's so strange.
Right. And I had to numb, like, it's weird because I had to numb something. I had to numb that grief and that sadness, but I still had a lot of emotions and feeling that I had with the combat, the situation that we found ourselves in. And again, I was responsible for other soldiers. So I had to,
then duty, I had
to make sure that they had enough ammo, that they had, that they were positioned correctly, that they weren't going to, you know, crossfire and end up shooting each other or anything like that. So it was a you know, a lot occupying my mind all at the same time. And, you know, I don't know, I mean, everyone survived from you know, on the American side anyways, that firefight. And so that was a blessing, that we all survived. But you know, you never know what could take place in a situation like that.
Definitely. And like, how has that experience, I suppose, shaped your views then on like war and, like, you know, like, how has that affected you, I suppose, like in terms of your views on like war, battle, like military, everything?
Yeah, I mean, it changed my perception of it because it became real. You know, when you watch a movie and it's an actor who's, you know, they get shot and they're holding their chest and they're bleeding and everything, and they're, tell my wife I love her, and they're doing all the theatrics of whatever. That's not real. I mean, I'm sure it's happened from time to time. You know, things like that have happened. They don't just make these things up, you know, all the time. But that's not reality. And also realizing that these terrible things that happen, in my mind, to other people, you know, every other military death up until that point was other people, other families. I didn't know any of these people. It could be you. It could be your family. It could be someone that you care about, that you love. And that made it really real, real fast. And I know I use that word real too many times in that sentence, but it came up, and it made me just feel like I didn't have a clue what to expect up until that moment. And that's when that's when life got real, and I stopped living in this fantasy land that everything's going to be fine.
Just like, it's probably such a just sobering feeling of like, you know, everything just is stripped by, and there's probably just raw with like what has happened.
Sure.
You know, and like what did like happen then after that? Like, you know, because you get that news again, you get kind of called into action, but then you have to go home and, you know, essentially bury your brother, like, and that's a long plane ride home, I can imagine, from, you know, Afghan, Pakistan border back to Connecticut.
Yeah, it was along several flights to get there. So I ended up leaving Afghanistan the next day, actually with my the same flight that my brother was on, the carrying case that they put on the plane. So I was on that same flight with him and the other soldier who was killed. And so I went as far as Kuwait with him, and from Kuwait continued on to Germany, from Germany to Atlanta, Atlanta back to Connecticut. So several flights, and when I was after that firefight was over, they flew a helicopter in and took me out of that area and brought me back to Bagram. And I met with a psychologist there who just wanted to make sure I was okay. I wasn't going to be a threat to myself or others. And she got me some sleeping medication. And she said, you're going to have a tough time sleeping over the next few days, maybe even the next few weeks. This will get you home at least. And so she got me that. So as far as the flights go, I don't remember any of them because I slept the entire time. I popped a sleeping pill as soon as I got on the plane, and 8 hours later we landed, and that's when I woke up. And so I don't really remember any of those flights until I got to Atlanta. And the Atlanta airport, for any military who have come home through that airport, during the war, they had all sorts of military supporters waving the American flags with signs, welcome home and all these things. And I saw those people, and, bless them. I'm grateful now looking back at it for having that type of support versus, people from the Vietnam era who had the exact opposite level of support. But I'm grateful now. But at the time, I didn't want to be welcomed home. I didn't want any sort of celebration or appreciation or anything, because in my mind as a big brother, I failed. And that was just the way I kind of saw everything, was as a big failure. And I tried to just kind of skirt around those people and just blend into the crowd, which is kind of hard to do in a military uniform because that stands out in the crowd as much as it's not supposed to. It's camouflage, but it's in a sea of everybody else wearing regular civilian clothes. It sticks out a little bit. That was a little bit difficult to do, but the flight from Atlanta back to Connecticut, I ended up getting on the plane first. A lot of times they let military members on the plane, board the plane first, and the flight attendant came up and asked about me and my service and stuff. And I said, look, I mean, no disrespect, but I don't want to talk about it. And I said, whoever's sitting in the seats next to me, if you don't mind, just let them know I don't want to talk about it. And they were actually really good. Nobody talked to me for the rest of that flight. And it wasn't until I got home though, and landed in Connecticut, that I realized how much hatred I had for, it's going to sound bad, but just people in general doing the things that they just normally do. When we got to, I went to my parents' house. It was like the first stop after getting home, and their street was lined with news vans from television and radio and newspapers. But they were all sorts of people. They were looking for an interview. And I was like, these people are vultures, and they are just out to get any little bit of a story that they can to sell ads all this. And I felt I wanted, I just wanted to disappear, and I didn't want I didn't want anything to do with that. But we had a public affairs officer from the military meet us at my parents' house, and he said, look, that's a perfectly normal reaction, and I understand it, and you don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to. And I was like, good, I'm out of here. Let's go. That's the end of the discussion. He said, but hear me out. If you don't talk to them, they're going to run the story of my brother's death anyways, regardless. And they may just go to a local grocery store parking lot and talk to somebody who's loading groceries in their car about what do you feel like? What do you think of what happened to this soldier? And of course, what are they going to say? Oh, it's sad. It's, a tragedy, and, that, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a quick soundbite. It's going to be 15 seconds, and then they're going to move on to the next story, and that'll be the end of it. They won't actually get to know, nobody will get to know who my brother was and what he what kind of person he was, or even the sacrifice that was made as far as the family that he left behind. No one will really know anything about that, and the story will be over in a matter of a day or two, and nobody will ever talk about him again. And going back to why I wrote the book is you die two deaths. You physically die in the day that the last person mentions your name. And so I was like, look, as much as I hate this and I don't want to do it, I'm actually kind of an introverted person. I don't like crowds and talking to people and stuff. But I was like, you know what? This isn't about me. This is for him. And if he can make that kind of sacrifice where he literally gave his life, yeah, I'm gonna step up and I'm gonna do this for him. It wasn't just me, my parents and everyone, came out and they talked, about him as well, from their perspective. But, from my point of view, that's why I wanted to talk to people. As much as just minutes earlier, I wanted to punch him in the face. I decided, you know what? It's bigger than me. It's bigger than my hang up on this. I need to do this for him. And that leads me to today in this conversation that we're having right now. This isn't a conversation about me necessarily. I mean, yeah, sure, I'm the one talking and I'm the guest on the show and everything, but I really am I'm passionate and feel fortunate that I'm able to talk to you. You're all the way over in Ireland now, and I'm talking to you about somebody who you would otherwise never know anything about. And so, and a lot of your listeners as well would likely never know anything about him had I not come on this show. And so it's for me, it's mostly about getting that message out there that as bad as war may seem, to the outsider looking in, it's worse to those who are actually affected.
Yeah. And I think it's like the talking about, like, I think sometimes we have like when someone dies, I think it's like there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of emotion. People kind of try and not talk about the person. Sometimes I feel it's like they don't want to bring up emotional feelings and others, so they avoid the conversation and they go to something maybe that's less meaningful. I have two friends here in Ireland, and they were twins. One of them died in a motorbike crash around 9 years ago, just like killed stone dead, pretty much. And like as fraternal twins, like it's probably like losing a part of yourself.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. I don't have a twin or anything like that, but he talks about him the whole time. He's very kind of comfortable with talking about him because exactly, man, what you're saying, just about he wants to preserve his twin's legacy, his brother's legacy, for as long as he can. And I think it's such a healthy way. I think this avoidance sometimes of, or awkwardness people have around death, can be a detriment. Really big kudos to you for, talking about your brother as much as you can, because I think that's how he does live on. As we said, like, people die twice, and I think it's, even though it's going to be raw and it's going to be sore to probably talk about at times, like yesterday, if it had been, definitely it probably would have been far rawer. I think it's how you preserve maybe Stephen's legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to do my part as long as I can, as long as people are willing to listen. I'm going to keep talking. And I appreciate this opportunity, obviously, to come on your show, like I said, and share this with you and your audience and your listeners. Hopefully there's some folks who haven't heard this story before, and maybe it touches them, maybe it motivates them to learn a little bit more about him. And if they get the book, wonderful. If not, if they just learn just the little bit that we talked about him here on this podcast, and then that to me is a mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and Scott, before we close out and all, like for people that maybe have had a recent bereavement, maybe of a sibling or a family member, like, and again, probably tips is the wrong way, but is there anything like, someone that's felt that like on a very visceral level, like any, coping tips, or like, did it help being able to preserve his legacy with the book and doing the podcast where you're able to talk about him and stuff like that? Yeah, would you have any advice maybe?
Sure. I think for going back to what we were saying before, everybody's going to be different. Some people are going to find writing, for example, like I wrote the book, that book is, for me, it was cathartic, and it was helpful to kind of process some of the things. It was difficult for sure. There are times, there's actually whole sections of the book, like the part where he was killed. I wrote all the stuff before, and then I wrote all the stuff after, and then I was like, fine, I'm done procrastinating, and I'll finally write this part when he actually died, because I didn't want to relive that in that sort of way over and over again. And it was difficult, but looking back on it now, I'm glad that I did. And sometimes I think some of the healing takes place. It might be a difficult journey to go through, but find your way of doing it. I definitely don't think keeping it bottled up inside and just never talking about it or anything is the way to go. I think, like you mentioned your friend who who lost a brother. He's trying to talk about him as well. That's a great way. For me, coming on a podcast like this is helpful. It's as therapeutic for me as it is useful for you and your listeners. And so I continue doing these types of things. But I guess just like anything, find what works for you. Find what makes you feel okay with what happened. It's never going to be okay. Like yes, I'm glad that this kind of thing happened. Like that's never going to be the case. And that's not what I'm suggesting. But so that it doesn't haunt you, so that it doesn't, keep you from continuing to live your life. And that's something that even to this day, I struggle with as well, because I have a bit of a guilt with the things that happened. And I feel like, maybe because he's not here, I shouldn't be able to experience this, that, or the other thing. And that's from a logical standpoint, I know that's not true, but there's still that baked in belief that I have that maybe I don't deserve these types of things. And so, whatever helps you work through those things so that you can live the life that, you know damn well that they would want you to live.
Yeah.
There's not a piece of me at all that believes that my brother wants me to torture myself for what happened to him. I think he would want me to just tackle life and live it to the fullest. Love and enjoy and find happiness and peace with all the things that happened. And look, bad things are going to happen. Everyone's going to lose somebody at some point. And that sucks, just to be perfectly honest. Like that's terrible, but it's part of life. And we have to learn how to move forward with that. And sure, don't forget the people. Don't forget the lessons that were learned. Don't forget any of those things, because those are all very valuable. But take those and grow from them and learn from them and live life. Don't let it be something that kind of handcuffs you and keeps you back.
Definitely. Well, look, Scott, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think it's an incredibly powerful story. I think I don't know if we've even mentioned the book. It's called Surviving Son.
That's right.
I think we've kept saying the book, but that's what the book's called. I'm going to link it down below anyway. And, I really highly recommend read it. We've given very snapshot of it. It goes into so much more detail, and it's just really good. So, but man, continued success with your podcast, episode 500, hopefully we'll be chatting to you again. You'll be on 750 or something.
Yeah, we will be there sooner. The time just flies, and so I think we'll be there. We'll be there sometime soon. So, if I do 2 episodes a week, and so that's a little over 100 episodes a year. We'll be there in not too long.
Definitely. And look, hopefully maybe we'll come back on the story again, or on the show again. Yeah, sure. I know we went into a lot of your and Steven's story, but again, there's probably so much more going on in the world as well that we could easily fill, I'd say, another nearly 2-hour episode as well. But look, Scott, really appreciate it, man. Enjoy the baseball today. I really appreciate you coming on.
All right. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Emil.